I was going to ask you something else, but on Wikipedia, can't somebody sue them someplace, maybe in the United Kingdom, Canada, if not in the United States? Get a bunch of these people who've been slandered, go after them, essentially. Yes, okay. My question is, I had the misfortune of being in Edmonton, Alberta, to talk about climate change on January the 31st and the 1st of February. And it was the coldest day they'd had in Edmonton for a very long time. So I had no problem making my case that there are many more important things to worry about than climate change. Okay, and but what accounts for the fact that Canadians seem to be, relative to the United States, quite gung-ho on climate change? Given their climate, you'd think that they would be a little bit more welcoming of a more salubrious climate, may I say that?
Well, I think Canadians see themselves as altruists and also as ineffectual. So, so taking a strong moral stance has only good consequences under those circumstances.
We have a number of questions. Is there anybody over on this side? Okay. And we have one here, and one there. So, Jacob, why don't you pick one of them, and we'll work our way backwards or forwards.
Several nations have come to the conclusion that climate change is caused by man-made activities and have begun several steps to address that, like cap-and-trade programs. Is there any evidence that cap-and-trade programs are working?
No. Well, cap-and-trade programs may end up working. So far, they've worked out very poorly. But the assumption of most people who promote cap-and-trade, or most people who promote the notion that we should reduce CO2, reduce carbon in the atmosphere, the assumption is that it would be a benign activity, that at worst we would have wasted some money, but it ended up with a cleaner environment. But in fact, Kyoto has emerged as being perhaps the greatest destroyer of the global environment now. My organization has a large third world wing, and it deals at the grassroots with organizations in the third world. And they are up in arms over what the ramifications of Kyoto are for them. Because, for example, when we purchase here a carbon offset, we take a plane flight where we want to shed our guilt for the emissions that are involved with that plane flight. So we might buy a carbon offset. The other half of that transaction is typically the purchase of a carbon sink in the third world. That carbon sink is very often an industrial eucalyptus plantation. Eucalyptus is fast-growing. In plantation form, it collects a lot of carbon. It's a very efficient way of removing carbon from the atmosphere. Those to get the land for those eucalyptus plantations, people are being evicted from farmland, which doesn't hold much carbon, and they're being evicted from old-growth forests. So we're seeing the takedown of old-growth forests, the takedown of farmland in the third world, people who are being dispossessed, typically without fair compensation, sometimes without compensation at all. And this is all in aid of solving a problem that may not exist. So the consequences, and that's only one consequence. Another consequence of our rush to implement Kyoto is that we are bringing back large hydrodams. Hydrodams became uneconomic several decades ago. All the good sites were built. The remaining sites were no longer economic. Well, with carbon credits changing the bookkeeping, suddenly large hydrodams are now coming back, and those hydrodams, they can flood. Well, in the case of the Three Gorges Dam, about 2 million people are being flooded from their homes for this dam, which is uneconomic, and it's not helping climate change, or may not be helping climate change, although it's being billed as helping climate change. And then another instance of bad environmental policy being caused by our desire to remove carbon or to switch to non-carbon fuels is a resurgence of nuclear power. And nuclear power has never been economic anywhere. There are a number of environmental risks with it. So we're seeing lots of environmental risks, a lot of real environmental damage, all this to mitigate a problem that may not exist.
Earlier you said that the press has been taken in by a big lie, and I don't disagree with that at all. For example, even the Heartland Institute's conference that they did on this subject back in early March, rather than really using what science was presented there and all the things that were going on there, they used it as a forum to attack us, including Dr. Singer, who was on ABC Evening News or the World News on Sunday. What do you think can be done or should be done to try to turn the tide with the media?
I think what may well, several things may change the public's perception. One is temperatures may be dropping. It was last year, we've seen quite a drop. But I think the role of the third world environmental groups could be key here, because they have interests different than the Western environmental groups. And in terms of having a moral case, I think the third world groups trump the Western environmental groups. And we may see more and more from them.